As I sit here in the fading light of day, my mind drifts back to a traumatic experience from my youth, one that still haunts me to this day. See, I was just a boy of 10 years old, living in a small, remote village nestled in the dense woods of northern Michigan. The village was known for its eerie, almost supernatural aura, and the locals often spoke of strange occurrences that took place in the woods surrounding the village. However, I never paid much heed to such tales, brushing them off as superstitions and old wives' tales. Little did I know that I was about to experience something so terrifying and inexplicable that it would shake my beliefs to the core. It was a regular summer evening when it all started. I was playing hide-and-seek with my friends in the woods, as we often did during the long days of summer vacation. As the day turned into dusk, we decided to call it a day and head back home. I was the last one to be found, hiding behind a large oak tree. As I emerged from my hiding spot, I noticed that the woods had turned eerily quiet. The rustling leaves and chirping birds that were once so familiar to me were nowhere to be heard. It sent a chill down my spine, but I dismissed it as my overactive imagination. I started walking towards my house, but soon realized that I had lost my way. The woods, which I had traversed countless times, now seemed unfamiliar and foreboding. The darkness was creeping in fast, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Panic started to set in, and I began to run, hoping to find my way back home. That's when I first caught a glimpse of it. A dark figure lurking in the shadows, just at the edge of my vision. It was tall, with long limbs and a hunched posture. Its eyes glowed a bright red, and I could see its sharp teeth gleaming in the moonlight. I froze in fear, unable to move or scream. The creature seemed to be studying me, as if assessing its prey. I could feel its malevolent presence, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. With a guttural growl, the creature lunged at me. I turned and ran with all my might, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear its footsteps closing in on me, and I could feel its hot breath on my neck. I stumbled over roots and rocks, but the adrenaline kept me going. I knew I had to find a way to escape this nightmare. I finally stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin in the woods. Desperation took over as I barged through the door and slammed it shut behind me. I hastily searched for anything that could serve as a barricade, but the cabin was empty and bare. I could hear the creature scratching at the door, its growls growing louder and more ferocious. I could see its red eyes glowing through the cracks in the door, and I knew I was running out of time. As I cowered in the corner, praying for the nightmare to end, I noticed something strange. The walls of the cabin seemed to be oozing a dark, viscous liquid. It was cold and slimy to the touch, and it seemed to be seeping in from the outside. I tried to wipe it away, but it kept coming back, as if the cabin itself was alive and trying to consume me. The smell was putrid, and I could taste the metallic tang in the air. Just as the creature was about to break through the door, the walls of the cabin suddenly caved in, and I was plunged into darkness. I could hear the creature screeching in frustration as it disappeared into the void. I was left with nothing but darkness and silence. I was trapped in this strange, otherworldly darkness, unable to see or hear anything. The slimy substance continued to ooze from the walls, covering me in its chilling embrace. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was completely cut off from the outside world, trapped in this living, breathing cabin. Time seemed to stretch on, and I lost all sense of day and night. The darkness seemed to seep into my very soul, and I could feel my sanity unraveling. I was consumed by fear and dread, as I had no idea how to escape this surreal nightmare. The walls of the cabin continued to pulsate with a sickly rhythm, and the smell of decay grew stronger with each passing moment. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I had given up all hope of ever seeing daylight again. I had resigned myself to this endless darkness, my mind fractured and my spirit broken. But then, one fateful night, the cabin changed. I heard a faint whisper in the darkness, a voice that sounded familiar yet otherworldly. It beckoned to me, urging me to follow it. Desperate for any kind of human contact, I stumbled towards the voice, my hands outstretched. The slimy substance on the walls seemed to guide me, leading me through a series of dark, winding corridors within the cabin. As I moved deeper into the cabin, the darkness seemed to grow even more oppressive. The walls were now pulsating with a sickening intensity, and the smell of decay was overpowering. I could hear whispers and faint murmurs all around me, as if the cabin itself was alive and whispering secrets into my ears. I tried to ignore them, focusing only on the voice that was guiding me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached a small room at the heart of the cabin. The walls of this room were covered in the same slimy substance, but it seemed to be pulsating with a strange, otherworldly light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested a grotesque, ancient-looking tome. The voice urged me to approach the tome, and against my better judgment, I reached out to touch it. As soon as my fingers made contact with the weathered pages, I was overcome by a surge of visions and memories. I saw the history of the cabin, how it came to be, and the entity that resided within it. It was a malevolent being, a creature that had been trapped in the cabin for centuries. It had lured unsuspecting victims into its grasp, using the cabin as its vessel to feed on their fear and despair. The slimy substance that covered the walls was its essence, a manifestation of its dark power. The tome revealed that I was not the first one to fall victim to the creature. There were many others before me, who had been lured into the cabin and consumed by the darkness. The creature was insatiable, constantly seeking new prey to sustain its existence. I realized with horror that I was destined to become its next victim, trapped in its clutches forever. With newfound resolve, I tried to resist the creature's influence. I refused to succumb to fear and despair, knowing that it was what the creature fed on. I sought a way to break the cycle, to escape the cabin and put an end to the creature's reign of terror. Days turned into weeks once again, and I fought against the darkness with all my strength. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in on me, the whispers and murmurs grew louder, and the creature's presence became more palpable. But I refused to give in. Then, one night, I stumbled upon a hidden passage within the cabin. The passage was hidden behind a false wall, covered in the same slimy substance that coated the rest of the cabin. With trembling hands, I pushed through the slimy barrier and stepped into the darkness of the hidden passage. The air was stale and musty, and the walls were cold and damp. I could hear the distant sounds of scratching and whispers, but I pressed on, determined to find a way out. The passage seemed to go on forever, with twists and turns that disoriented me, but I pushed forward, fueled by desperation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw a faint glimmer of light up ahead. As I got closer, I realized that it was a small opening that led to the outside. With renewed hope, I squeezed through the narrow opening and stumbled out into the open air. I was free from the suffocating darkness of the cabin, but the horror was far from over. I found myself in a desolate, abandoned forest, with trees that seemed to whisper and sway ominously in the wind. I could still feel the presence of the creature, lingering in the shadows, watching me. I knew I had to keep moving, so I ran through the forest, my heart pounding in my chest. Every step felt heavy, as if the very ground was trying to pull me back towards the cabin. But I refused to give up. I pushed through the thick underbrush, ignoring the scratches and cuts that covered my body, and ran with all my might. As I sprinted through the forest, I could hear the creature's wails and screams behind me, growing louder and more furious. It was desperate to reclaim its prey, to drag me back into the darkness of the cabin. I could feel its malevolent energy closing in, but I refused to let it catch me. I ran for what felt like hours until I finally stumbled upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a dilapidated house, barely standing against the test of time. I had no other choice but to seek shelter there, hoping that it would provide me some respite from the creature's pursuit. I cautiously entered the house, and to my relief, the creature's presence seemed to fade. The air was heavy with dust and decay, but it felt strangely peaceful compared to the suffocating darkness of the cabin. I found a corner and curled up, exhausted and battered, but grateful for the temporary refuge. As I lay there, I reflected on the horrors I had experienced. The slimy cabin, the haunting whispers, the ancient tome, and the relentless pursuit of the creature. It was a nightmare that I could hardly believe was real, but I knew that I had to do something about it. I couldn't let the creature continue to prey on innocent victims, trapping them in its dark domain. With newfound determination, I decided to confront the creature. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. I had to find a way to banish it from this world once and for all. Armed with makeshift weapons and a heart full of courage, I ventured out of the house and back into the forest, ready to face my fears. The creature was waiting for me. Its form shifted and changed, a monstrous amalgamation of shadows and darkness. It screeched and lunged at me with its gnarled claws, but I stood my ground, fighting back with all my might. The battle was intense, with the forest echoing with our clashes and the creature's roars. But I refused to back down. I channeled all my fear and rage into my attacks, striking at the creature with unwavering determination. The creature fought back fiercely, but I could see that my resolve was wearing it down. It was losing its grip on reality, fading in and out of existence as I continued to press my attack. With one final, mighty swing, I struck a decisive blow, and the creature let out an ear-splitting screech before dissipating into the shadows, never to be seen again. I stood there, panting and covered in bruises and cuts, victorious but also shaken to my core. The adrenaline that had fueled my fight drained from my body, leaving me feeling weak and exhausted. But I had done it. I had defeated the entity that had haunted me for so long. As the sun began to rise, casting its warm light over the clearing, I made my way back to the dilapidated house. I knew my ordeal was over, but the memories would stay with me forever. I would carry the scars of that traumatic experience, both physical and emotional, for the rest of my life. I made my way back to civilization, and eventually, I found the courage to share my story with others. Some believed me, while others dismissed it as a mere tall tale. But I knew the truth. I had faced a terrifying entity that had threatened my very existence, and I had triumphed. In the years that followed, I tried to move on from my traumatic experience. I sought therapy to help me cope with the nightmares and the lingering fear that sometimes haunted me. I found solace in the support of loved ones and pursued a fulfilling life. But the memories of that fateful night would always remain with me, a reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. In the end, I learned that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones that we can't fully understand. The entity in the cabin was a manifestation of ancient, malevolent energy that had lingered in that secluded forest for generations. It preyed on unsuspecting travelers, trapping them in its dark domain, feeding on their fear and anguish. I also learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the ability to face it head-on and stand your ground. It was my determination to survive and protect myself that had ultimately led to my victory over the creature. It was a harrowing experience that had forever changed me, but it had also made me stronger in ways I never could have imagined. To this day, I avoid remote cabins and dark forests, wary of the shadows and the unknown. But I also carry a sense of resilience, knowing that I had faced true terror and emerged victorious. I hope that my story serves as a cautionary tale to others, a reminder to be wary of the unknown, and to never underestimate the power of the darkness that lurks in the shadows. As I finish recounting my traumatic experience, I glance out the window and see the sun setting, casting long shadows across the room. Despite the scars that remain, I am grateful for the lessons I have learned and the strength I have gained. I am no longer the same person I was before that fateful night, and I carry the weight of those memories with me, a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. And as the darkness settles in once again, I light a candle, its flickering flame casting a warm glow in the room. I take a deep breath and remind myself that I am safe, that the creature is gone, and that I am stronger because of it. But I also know that the darkness will always hold secrets, and that some mysteries are better left unsolved. With a heavy heart, I blow out the candle, leaving the room in darkness once again. But this time, the darkness doesn't hold the same terror it once did. I am no longer a helpless victim, but rather a survivor who has faced true horror and come out on the other side.